Rain lashed against the tall glass windows of the Rivera Corporation building, streaking down like tears that refused to stop. Inside the conference hall, beneath the cold glow of fluorescent lights, stood Amelia Hart, the woman who had once built dreams with trembling hands and a heart full of hope. Now she stood before the man who had crushed both, Ethan Rivera, the CEO whose name was whispered in every business circle with awe and fear. His gaze was unreadable, sharp as glass and twice as cold, as he leaned back in his leather chair, his lips curling into a smirk that carried both amusement and cruelty. The words fell from his mouth like poison, "You want him back." Before she could respond, he stood, walked toward her, and in a move that made the room feel suddenly smaller, he pulled her close enough for her to hear the steady rhythm of the man who once had no heart for her pain. Speech balloon before the story continues. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love that survives time and pride, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps bring more stories like this to life. The world seemed to blur for Amelia as memories flooded her. 5 years ago, she had been a bright young marketing manager at Rivera Corp, ambitious, hardworking, and foolishly in love. Ethan had been her mentor, her boss, and eventually, her world. He had seen potential in her when no one else did. Together they had built campaigns that broke records, and slowly, behind late-night meetings and whispered laughter, something deeper grew. But Ethan was a man who hid behind walls built from loss. His first love, a woman named Clara, had died in an accident that left him bitter and afraid to love again. Amelia never knew that shadow until it consumed their relationship. One morning, without warning, Ethan ended everything, claiming love had no place in business, and that she was better off without him. She left the company the same day, shattered, promising herself never to look back. But fate is rarely merciful. Life brought her back to this very building, this very man, for a reason that tore her heart open all over again. Amelia's younger brother, Noah, was one of the rising designers working under Rivera Corp. But after an internal fallout, Noah had been unfairly dismissed, accused of leaking confidential data. He was innocent, and Amelia knew it. She had spent weeks gathering proof to clear his name, but the only way to get that evidence recognized was through Ethan himself, the CEO who held absolute authority. And now, here she was, standing in front of him once again, years after he broke her heart, hearing that mocking questions spill from his lips. The rain outside grew heavier, and so did the tension in the room. Amelia steadied her breath, determined not to break. Her eyes, once warm and trusting, now burned with a quiet strength. She told herself this wasn't about love. This was about justice, about saving her brother's career. But even as she tried to focus on that, her heart betrayed her, because being this close to Ethan again, feeling his presence, the familiar scent of his cologne, brought back everything she had buried. She could see in his eyes that he recognized it too. That same flicker of something he had long suppressed. Ethan, however, wasn't ready to show mercy. His empire had been built on control, on never letting anyone see his weakness. He circled her slowly, testing her resolve, asking questions meant to provoke her. Why was she defending her brother so fiercely? Why come to him after all these years? Did she still think emotions could fix everything? Each question cut deeper than the last. But Amelia answered each one calmly, holding her ground. She wasn't the naive girl he remembered. She was stronger now. Life had hardened her, but it hadn't taken away her heart. As Ethan studied her, something inside him began to shift. He remembered the nights they spent working until dawn, when she would bring him coffee and remind him that not everything had to be perfect to be meaningful. He remembered the day he broke things off, not because he stopped loving her, but because he feared what love could take away. Losing Clara had taught him that love was a weakness, losing Amelia had proven it was also a punishment. Yet, standing before her now, hearing the quiet tremor in her voice as she fought for her brother, he felt the first crack in the walls he had built so carefully. The meeting ended without resolution. Amelia left with a promise from Ethan that he would look into it. It wasn't much, but it was something. As she walked through the marble lobby of the Rivera building, she realized how exhausting it was to pretend indifference. Her heart hurt, not just because of Ethan's cruelty, but because she could still see the man he used to be, hiding behind his armor. The following week, Amelia received an unexpected call from Rivera Corp. Her brother's case had been reopened. Ethan had personally requested a review. She wanted to believe it was just a professional gesture, but deep down, she knew better. Ethan didn't do anything without reason. And that reason was her. Over the next few days, Amelia found herself drawn back into the orbit of the man she had tried so hard to forget. He began involving her in the review meetings, asking for her perspective, challenging her ideas, almost as if trying to see if she was still the same woman he once knew. Their arguments were sharp but charged with the unspoken history between them. Sometimes, in the middle of heated discussions, their eyes would meet, and time would pause. There was anger, regret, longing, a storm neither could name. One evening, after a long day of debates and decisions, Ethan asked her to stay back. The office was quiet, city lights glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. He handed her a file, evidence clearing No's name completely. Amelia's breath caught. Her brother was finally free from blame. She whispered a thank you, her voice trembling with relief. Ethan only nodded, his expression unreadable. But before she could leave, he spoke softly, saying he didn't do it for Noah. He did it because he owed her something far greater than an apology. Amelia froze. For the first time, she saw the pain behind his composure. He confessed how he had hated himself for years after pushing her away, believing that keeping her out of his life was protecting her from the curse of his grief. But he had only ended up destroying them both. His voice broke when he said he never stopped thinking about her. Every late-night meeting, every empty morning, every success that felt hollow. He had built his empire on power, but somewhere along the way, he had lost the only thing that made it meaningful. Amelia stood there, tears pooling in her eyes. It would have been easy to fall back into his arms, to forgive everything in a heartbeat. But she had learned that love isn't about returning to what was, it's about rebuilding what can be. She told him she needed time, not to remember their past, but to see if he could be part of her future. Ethan nodded, a rare humility softening his features. He didn't push her this time. He simply said he would wait. Weeks passed. Amelia focused on helping her brother restart his career, while Ethan began showing quiet gestures that spoke louder than grand promises. He visited No's new project, offered silent support, and even stepped back from his usual cold demeanor during meetings. People in the company began noticing a change. The CEO who once commanded fear now treated people with patience and respect. Amelia watched from afar, her heart slowly healing in the space between what was and what could be. One late evening, after a company charity gala, Amelia found herself alone on the rooftop terrace, watching the city lights shimmer. She felt a quiet peace, something she hadn't known in years. Behind her, she heard footsteps. She turned to find Ethan standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee, just like old times. They stood side by side in silence, the city humming below. He looked at her, eyes softer than she'd ever seen, and said, "You once told me love doesn't need perfection, just presence. I'm here now, Amelia. Not as your boss, not as a man haunted by his past, but as someone who finally learned how to stay." Her eyes glistened with tears, but this time, they weren't of pain. She smiled faintly, realizing that maybe, after all this time, love hadn't left them, it had just been waiting for them to be ready. She stepped closer, letting the space between them disappear, and for the first time, when Ethan pulled her close, it wasn't out of power or pride. It was out of peace. Speech balloon. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep emotional stories like this alive, stories that remind us love can heal, even after being broken. And before we end, Sparkles, tell us in the comments, would you give someone a second chance if they truly changed? As the night sky stretched endlessly above them, Amelia realized something profound. Sometimes, second chances aren't about going back, they're about moving forward, together, with scars that no longer define, but remind. Ethan held her hand, the storm within them finally calm. And in that quiet rooftop moment, surrounded by the city that once witnessed their fall, they finally found their beginning.